On Christmas Eve 1938, a museum curator named Marjorie Courtenay Latimer opened a fishing net off South Africa and found something that shouldn't have existed. A 5-foot fish, steel blue, with strange lobed fins. Science had closed the book on this species 65 million years ago. Extinct. Filed away next to the dinosaurs. But the coelacanth wasn't reading the textbooks. It had been swimming the deep reefs of Africa the entire time. While we wrote its obituary, we've mapped less than 5% of the ocean floor. Less than 5%, on a planet that's 70% water. So here's the question we can't stop asking. If science got the coelacanth wrong, what else did it get wrong? Tonight, 11 prehistoric giants, animals paleontology has officially declared extinct, that might still be alive in the one place we've never actually looked. At number 1, the case even skeptical scientists can't fully close. Number 11, Tusoteuthis, the Cretaceous kraken. Picture the floor of an inland sea, 90 million years ago. Something the length of a school bus drifts through the dark, arms trailing behind it like cables. In 2011, a Kansas construction crew found a fossilized ambush in the Smoky Hill chalkbeds, a giant squid-like creature and the fish it had killed, both frozen mid-strike. Tusoteuthis is estimated at 7 to 10 meters, built like a modern giant squid, but larger. Its skeleton was cartilage instead of bone, so it rarely fossilizes at all. Therefore, almost everything we know about it comes from a handful of specimens. Here's where it gets strange. Modern giant squid were considered myth for most of human history, right up until 2004, when researchers finally photographed a live one in the wild. We insisted the kraken was fiction, until we caught it on camera. But experts note that soft-bodied extinction is nearly impossible to disprove either way. Missing fossils could mean the animal died out, or simply that it never fossilized. Still, if a boneless giant can vanish from the record that easily, imagine what an armored one could get away with. Number 10. Zephactinus, the 6-meter predator with a temper problem. In 1952, paleontologist George Sternberg found a Zephactinus fossil in Kansas, with a second fish, nearly 4 meters long, still inside its stomach. It had swallowed its prey whole and died from the effort. That single fossil, fish within a fish, became one of American paleontology's most famous finds. Zephactinus grew up to 6 meters, built like a torpedo with a mouthful of fangs. Its bone density matches a true deep-water ambush hunter, so its anatomy was already suited to darker, colder water than most Cretaceous fish. The species died out 66 million years ago in the same asteroid impact that took the dinosaurs, but deep water absorbed far less of that shock than sunlit shallows. Therefore, if any fish lineage had a shot at slipping past that extinction, it looked exactly like this one. Here's the twist. In 1976, fishermen off Japan hauled up a fish so unfamiliar that ichthyologists argued over its classification for years, proof that modern oceans still hide uncatalogued body plans. But no confirmed Zephactinus remains have ever turned up in post-Cretaceous rock. The absence is real, it's just not the same as proof. And our next candidate didn't just survive an extinction event, its whole family tree is built for exactly that. Number 9. Cladocelach, the primitive shark that refuses to disappear cleanly. 400 million years ago, in shallow Devonian seas, something moved with a shape that's eerily familiar. A shark. Cladocelach is one of the earliest shark ancestors ever found, preserved in remarkable detail in Ohio's Cleveland Shale. It measured around 2 meters, streamlined like a modern mako rather than the sluggish predators around it. So even then, sharks were already overachievers. As a lineage, they've now outlived 5 mass extinctions, including one that killed 90% of marine life. Therefore, the real mystery isn't whether ancient shark lineages could survive into the deep, it's how many already have. Modern deep-sea sharks like the frilled shark and goblin shark are themselves living fossils, barely changed in tens of millions of years. Here's where it gets strange. In 1976, the U.S. Navy accidentally snagged a 15-foot shark off Hawaii belonging to a species entirely unknown to science, the megamouth shark, which had avoided human contact for all of recorded history. But mainstream scientists are clear that Cladocelach itself has no confirmed living descendants, only distant cousins. Ancestor isn't the same as unbroken bloodline. Still, it proved something the rest of this list is built on. Sharks don't just survive extinctions, they specialize in them. Number 8. Elasmosaurus, the plesiosaur behind 1,000 sea serpent stories. In 1868, paleontologist Edward Drinker Cope assembled the first Elasmosaurus skeleton and put the skull on the wrong end, mistaking the tail for the throat. An easy mistake, because nothing else on Earth had a neck like this. Elasmosaurus stretched up to 14 meters, more than half of it neck. Imagine a city bus with the engine swapped for a python. 71 vertebrae ran down that neck alone, more than any known animal, which is exactly why so many cultures independently describe this same silhouette rising from the water. Elasmosaurus died in the same asteroid impact that ended the dinosaurs. But plesiosaurs as an order had already proven, over 150 million years, that they could handle open ocean and considerably deeper water than once assumed. Here's the twist. In 1977, a Japanese trawler pulled up a decomposing carcass off New Zealand. Long neck, 4 flippers, small head. So plesiosaur-like that biologists on board briefly entertained the idea, before lab analysis identified it as a decayed basking shark. Most sea serpent sightings resolve to known animals this way. But if a basking shark can fool trained biologists, that tells you how much room for error exists in every account, in both directions. Elasmosaurus gave the world its sea serpent silhouette. Our next candidate gave it actual armor. Number 7. Dunkleosteus, the armored nightmare of the Devonian seas. 360 million years ago, something with a crocodile-rivaling bite patrolled the water wearing bone instead of skin. Dunkleosteus had no teeth, just self-sharpening bony blades built into its jaw, strong enough to slice through other armored fish. It reached an estimated 6 meters and over a ton. Picture a delivery truck with a bite force researchers calculate as among the strongest of any fish, living or extinct. Dunkleosteus disappeared around 358 million years ago as ocean oxygen levels collapsed. But that collapse hit shallow, warm water hardest. Deep trenches would have been comparatively insulated from it. Therefore, cryptozoologists argue, deep water is exactly where a survivor should be hiding. Here's where it gets strange. No confirmed Dunkleosteus fossil has ever turned up in rock younger than the Devonian. Not one, anywhere, in over 150 years of searching. That silence is unusually clean. And that's the problem for this candidate. Total, well-documented absence is itself strong evidence against survival. Most paleontologists treat this as one of the more settled extinctions here. But our next candidate is famous for a body part that was never built to survive at all, which makes its case almost impossible to close. Number 6. Helicoprion, the shark with a buzzsaw for a mouth. For a century, all paleontologists had of Helicoprion was a bizarre spiral of teeth, with no idea where on the body it even belonged. It wasn't until CT scans in 2013 that researchers confirmed the spiral sat inside the lower jaw, a conveyor belt of teeth that never stopped growing. The animal itself reached up to 12 meters, nearly 2 city buses long, making it one of the largest cartilaginous fish that ever lived. So this wasn't a curiosity. It was a genuine giant, and we only understood its own mouth a decade ago. Its skeleton, like Tusateuthis, was cartilage, which barely fossilizes. Therefore, everything we know comes almost entirely from teeth. Its body, its behavior, its final years are all reconstructed from spiral jaws and little else. Here's the twist. Its fossil record goes dark before the end Permian extinction, the worst die-off in Earth's history. But the record goes dark is a very different claim than confirmed extinct, especially for an animal whose body was built out of material that rarely survives to be found at all. We've spent 100 years figuring out where its teeth went. Maybe it's time to ask where the rest of it went too. And our next candidate raises the stakes further, because for this one, we have direct testimony. Number 5. Basilosaurus, the sea serpent that used to be a whale. When the first Basilosaurus bones turned up in Alabama in the early 1800s, scientists assumed they'd found a giant marine reptile and named it king lizard accordingly. It took decades to correct. Basilosaurus wasn't a reptile at all. It was one of the earliest fully aquatic whales. It stretched up to 18 meters, so long and serpentine that early fossil hunters mistook its vertebrae for pieces of giant sea snakes. That shape alone explains why, for over a century, Basilosaurus and sea serpent were treated as the same mystery. Basilosaurus went extinct around 34 million years ago, as cooling oceans reshaped its shallow hunting grounds. But therefore, unlike most animals on this list, it disappeared in a slow climate shift rather than a single catastrophe. Exactly the kind of change that tends to leave refuge populations behind in isolated pockets. Here's where it gets strange. Serpentine segmented sea serpent sightings have been reported for centuries by sailors from New England to Scandinavia, including a well-documented 19th century case off Massachusetts, investigated at the time by the Linnaean Society of New England. Later analysis suggests many such reports were oarfish or porpoises breaching in sequence. But Basilosaurus taught the world that whales weren't always what we imagine, and our next candidate isn't folklore at all. It's a documented mammal, extinct within recorded human history. Number 4. Mosasaurus, the apex reptile built for the deep from the start. In 1764, workers in a Maastricht quarry found an enormous jaw, one of the fossils that helped found paleontology itself, back when Europe barely had a concept of extinction at all. Mosasaurus reached up to 17 meters, with double-hinged jaws that could swallow prey nearly its own size whole. This wasn't a coastal opportunist. Isotope analysis of its bones shows chemical signatures consistent with genuinely deep, cold water hunting. Mosasaurus died in the same asteroid impact that ended the dinosaurs and Elasmosaurus. But therefore, of every marine reptile here, its own bone chemistry already proves it was comfortable in exactly the depth range that would have offered the most protection. Here's the twist. In 1977 and again in the 1990s, deep trawling expeditions off New Zealand and Japan pulled up remains initially misidentified in the field as reptilian, before lab analysis reclassified them as sharks or bony fish in decay. Every one of those cases was corrected under lab conditions, and no confirmed Mosasaurus remains have ever come from post-Cretaceous rock. The clean pattern of field mistake, lab correction, is itself the strongest argument against survival. Mosasaurus was already built for the depths that might have saved it. What's next isn't reptile, and isn't hypothetical, at all. Number 3. Leviathan melvillei, the predator whale named after the author of Moby Dick. In 2008, an expedition in Peru's Pisco Ica Desert uncovered a skull nearly 3 meters long, with teeth up to 36 centimeters, bigger than any tooth ever recorded from a T-Rex. Researchers named it Leviathan melvillei in 2010. The full animal reached over 13 meters and up to 60 tons, a sperm whale redesigned as a dedicated hunter, with interlocking teeth built to grip and tear other large mammals. Functionally, it was the ocean's apex predator, roughly 9 million years ago. Its disappearance lines up with major shifts in Miocene ocean currents. But therefore, unlike the reptiles on this list, Leviathan was warm-blooded and air-breathing. It never needed an extinction-proof habitat, just what modern sperm whales already have: the ability to dive 2,000 meters into total darkness for over an hour, hunting prey no human has ever seen alive. Here's where it gets strange. Modern sperm whales carry sucker scars far larger than any known squid could leave. Part of why scientists inferred the colossal squid's existence decades before finally filming one in 2007. Biologists attribute those scars to the colossal squid, an animal confirmed to exist, not to anything descended from Leviathan. But the scars prove something on their own. Massive, unfilmed predators are hunting in total darkness right now, whether or not this one is among them. And our next candidate isn't ancient history. It's an extinction we caused, less than 300 years ago. Number 2. Steller's sea cow, the giant we killed and then kept seeing. In 1741, naturalist Georg Steller, shipwrecked in the Commander Islands, documented a species of giant sea cow unlike anything on record. Gentle, slow, enormous. Within 27 years, hunters wiped out the entire known population. The last confirmed sighting was 1768. The animal reached up to 9 meters and 10 tons, built like a manatee stretched to an almost unimaginable scale. Its blubber so thick that Bering's starving crew survived largely by eating it. So this is one of the best documented, most precisely dated extinctions on the entire list. Therefore, this candidate doesn't need speculation about ancient fossil gaps. It has something rarer: living memory. Indigenous groups across the Commander Islands and Kamchatka kept independent oral accounts of sightings for generations after 1768, and Russian and Inuit whaling logs occasionally recorded encounters matching its profile. Here's the twist. In 1962, a Soviet whaling vessel in the Bering Strait reported 6 large, slow-moving animals matching the sea cow almost exactly, logged by a professional crew with every incentive to identify known species correctly. That sighting was never independently verified, and biologists called 2 centuries of undetected survival a real anomaly. But unlike anything ancient here, this is a species we know existed recently, which lowers the burden of proof considerably. We killed Steller's sea cow ourselves on purpose within a generation, and people kept reporting it anyway for 200 years. Which brings us to the one name where the scientific establishment itself refuses to call the case closed. Number 1. Megalodon. The case science still can't fully close. In 1875, the HMS Challenger expedition, the same voyage that helped found modern oceanography, dredged up 2 fossilized shark teeth from the South Pacific floor. Later dating estimated those specific teeth at 11 to 24,000 years old, recent enough to reopen a debate the official extinction date was supposed to have closed. Megalodon is estimated at 15 to 18 meters and up to 50 tons. A great white scaled up to city bus size, with a bite force among the strongest of any animal that's ever lived. It left behind thousands of fossilized teeth across every ocean, giving it an unusually rich fossil record. The accepted extinction date is around 3.6 million years ago, driven by cooling oceans and the loss of the small whales it depended on. But therefore, that extinction is tied specifically to shallow, temperate coastal water, not to any inability to survive in the ocean generally. Here's where it gets strange. Some researchers have proposed an ocean shadow zone hypothesis, that a residual population retreating into deep, cold trench water could persist at extremely low density, rarely surfacing, rarely leaving fossils. And there's real precedent. The megamouth and goblin sharks, both real, both confirmed to exist in exactly this kind of deep water, both unknown to science until the 20th century. But the honest counterpoint stands. 50 tons of body mass needs immense caloric intake, and the shadow zone is comparatively food poor, a serious problem for the theory. Most paleontologists consider Megalodon genuinely extinct, but even they admit the fossil record has produced younger than expected teeth before, and that we've discovered large sharks we didn't know existed in exactly this habitat, within living memory. That's not proof. It's something stranger. An open door nobody currently studying the ocean is fully willing to close. We started with a coelacanth pulled from a fishing net in 1938, proof that science can declare a species dead while it's still very much alive. 11 names later, we've moved from a boneless squid nobody can fossilize, to a giant we killed ourselves less than 3 centuries ago and kept seeing anyway, to a shark whose own extinction date keeps quietly shifting with every new tooth. None of this proves Megalodon or Basilosaurus or Steller's sea cow is still out there. That was never the point. The point is simpler, and a little more uncomfortable. Extinction has never actually been proof. It's an absence of evidence, dressed up as a conclusion. Because that's the best any of us can do about a place we've explored less than a Martian valley photographed from orbit. So the next time someone tells you a species is officially extinct, ask the only question that matters. Extinct where? Exactly. Because we've mapped less than 5% of the one place on this planet built to keep secrets. If this kind of mystery keeps you up at night the way it does us, you know what to do. Subscribe, and we'll meet you back here for the next one the ocean's been hiding.